Sometimes in life, you look at a piece of media and think, what the hell were they thinking? But it's not often that you get to say it twice in a row.
Vertigo, a bygone DC Comics imprint with an unfathomable impact on the history of comics as we know them. Home to many creators and their famous works, like Moore and Total Ben with Swamp Thing, or Ennis and Dylan with Preacher.
But in a sea of incredible books, some books get lost to the annals of time. Seemingly long lost entries in the bibliographies of some of the biggest names in comics are left floating in the backrooms of Read Comics Online, waiting for someone to stumble upon them.
Sometimes those books receive a second life, repackaged and peddled for a variety of reasons, all leading to the same result: new eyes on old books. With the boon of time and fresh eyes, we can look back on these old works and either revel in their glory or wonder,
What the hell were they thinking? Welcome back to Midnight Grappler Animals, the home of Flub Nation. I'm your host, Lan, and with me I've got a man that some refer to as Huey Magoo, but here we call him Salt M. Bank. Salt, I always have a big issue with myself whenever I'm recording one of these. I always worry about if I'm not like high energy enough. I'm worried if I'm coming across as low energy. But today specifically, I got a lot of energy. I got a lot of room in me to hate.
yeah, I'm seeing it like the red particles and waves flowing off of Goku when he first went Kaioken. Like, I'm visualizing that.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. And the great thing is it's not just us two today. We actually have a third voice in the chat. Do you want to introduce yourself, third voice?
Hello, I'm Third Voice, aka Serg, aka Fantomas on Twitter. How's it going?
We're doing good, man.
Good.
How are you today?
Yeah, we're chilling.
I'm good. I'm ready to get into these two bizarre comics. I guess that's the way to put it nicely.
So actually, let's lead into what is your experience with Morrison's comics to spoil things just a little bit.
I'm actually relatively new to Morrison. I only started reading them over the quarantines because I was like, well, I was bored and I was like, I've read most of Alan Moore. I should probably read the other person that everyone like credits modern comics to. So I jumped in with Doom Patrol because I was really liking the show, and I kind of went from there. So I've read quite a bit of Morrison at this point, but I'm not like I don't have the long time loyalty a lot of people do have with Morrison.
Nice. What about you, Salt?
I have read Morrison for over 10 years. I think I started it in high school. And like Grant Morrison was my guy. If I go a little confessional mode here, I was even like styling myself after Grant Morrison in like high school.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I was like
Like,
hardcore.
do you mean like fashion wise or?
Yeah.
Shave your head.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, both of those things. Fashion-wise, shaving my head, like looking into the same philosophies. Like I wanted to be Grant Morrison.
Damn, you didn't tell me any of this before we started.
I didn't know if I wanted to
this
cop
is,
to
this
it.
is a shock to me. This is a
Deep
shock.
confession right now.
This is crazy. This casts a whole new light on what we're about to do.
Well, I want to be authentic and vulnerable, and Grant's work was really personal to me. There, I can get more into it later, but there was a lot philosophically that spoke to me, and I was probably the worst kind of Grant Morrison fanboy.
Oh no.
Oh no, but
I
I
mean,
go ahead, Serge.
I was gonna say, I mean, like, I probably was the same way with Alan Moore. I don't think
Mm.
I don't think you can like be a teenager into comics and not be semi obnoxious. Like
It's
period.
required.
Yeah, that's
Like
that. I mean,
it's like a rite of
we've all
passage.
seen Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, the props is that you got through it versus a lot of people who are still in it. And
That's so true, dude.
that's the difference.
You're so right. Yeah, I mean, getting through it is what this is about. I mean, Grant's said and written a few things over the years that I am definitely not in the same place I was, and this is a sort of reappraisal or a reckoning of sorts. This episode. Last thing specific to these works is Vimanarama. One of the books we'll be covering today was something I'd heard about and wanted to cover. I stumbled upon it in my local comics shop for like $1, and I was like, "Fuck it,
Damn.
I'll read." Yeah, I picked it up. I was like, "I always wanted to read this," and it was a comic. It was definitely a comic.
Yep, we'll get it.
And I thought
It is definitely a comic.
Yep, it's definitely one of the comics of all time.
But finishing it, I remembered, oh hey, this artist Morrison collabed with Philip Bond also worked on Morrison with Kill Your Boyfriend, which when I was like 20, I thought was like this genius Vertigo work. And as Stan the Man said, enough said.
It was all history from there.
Yeah.
I think for me, my first touch with Morrison's work was around the time that I started getting into comics. So this was like around 2007, 2008. I was like 11 years old, I think, when I found a copy of Earth 2 in my library. And, again, I'm a shithead little 11-year-old reading through this book. You're look Quietly's art is definitely what drew me to it. But that was my first real taste of Morrison's work, and I sort of, got to know the whole deal with their collaboration specifically with Quietly and Morrison. So then I read All-Star Superman after that, and it's never... I don't think I've ever had a strong connection to Morrison's work, at least not in the sense that I never shaved my head to styled myself like Morrison, but it's been a very like passive, like this is some good work, I'm reading this is some good work. And I think for me that sort of shifted around 2020, because that's when I started going on Twitter about comics and starting to see, like the sort of fervor that people online tend to have about Morrison's work, and sort of the high regard they hold it in. So the past couple of years have sort of been me reckoning with that and sort of wondering where that sort of admiration comes from. And, like when I was in high school, I always heard about the battles between Morrison and Moore, and I was never into that kind of stuff. I don't know if you two were, but...
I mean, I that's funny you ask because I was such a Grant Morrison stan. Once I learned about the rivalry between the two, I had liked Moore previously, but then I was like, oh fuck Alan Moore. He like
holy shit. Oh,
I think me and Serg might have come to blows if we had met, and you wouldn't have it wouldn't have been you instigating it. I would have been just the fucking the catalyst. I would have been like, what, dude? What? You don't have the correct comics opinions?
I would just be in the sidelines, just holding my hands behind my head, just wondering what the fuck was going on.
I don't think I knew enough about comics to have that opinion. I mean, I knew about Morrison and Moore having beef, but I didn't know enough about Morrison, and all my money, what limited funds I had as a teen, were going to buy more comics. So I was that's where it stopped. Wizard magazine had kind of not been a thing anymore either. So,
yeah, that's right.
Which, it's kind of a bummer. How much more fun would it have been if Wizard magazine was still around during a lot of that?
Oh, that'd be so tight.
Yeah.
That would have been so amazing. But, That's what it was.
We're never gonna get something like the Todd McFarlane Peter David fight out of Morrison
Yeah,
anymore.
exactly.
But actually, before we move on with anything, I think we should address not necessarily an elephant in the room, but just sort of a disclaimer, I guess, because with the topic of more, obviously, this is this is actually something that we sort of not really ran afoul of, but I guess with the Seth Jacob episode, Seth, bless your heart,
We
bless your
haven't
soul.
we haven't run afoul. I think there's been a really big miscommunication in like the comics community, and I think it's a lot of people trying to operate out of good faith here. It really all just takes a clarification and being a little less online for all parties. Do you mind if I read these
Yeah, go
quotes?
for it. Go for it.
So,
This is all you.
thank you. Uh, this is from an interview in The Times with Grant Morrison. So the writer of this article says, in the author blurb of the American edition of Grant Morrison's novel Luna, Morrison uses the pronoun they, a description applied to him after an interview which he now sees as akin to an honorary degree. In the interview, this is Grant talking, in the interview, I said that if I had been doing now what I was doing back in the 1990s, I would be viewed as non-binary or genderqueer. Suddenly, it was taken up by the fan press, and I was awarded the label they them. I never asked for it. I come from a generation where that just doesn't matter. Even being labeled at all is anathema to me. I can't live in a box. I'm going to let down anyone who sticks a label on me. It will drop off quite naturally. Now you hear that, and Morrison says that, and it's really clear. Morrison does not care whether you say they, them, or he, him. I have transgender friends. They're pretty adamant about what pronouns they want you to use. So for me, it's just a little odd to see these fans like constantly popping up in people's replies saying, "You gotta say they them. You gotta say they them. It's not he him." It's like, dude, your heart is in the right place, but like this is not the right battlefield. This one actually doesn't matter.
So there's been nothing like running counter to that since no interviews or anything, saying that actually I do use, or Morrison does use they them pronouns.
Morrison uses they them, but like doesn't ask for it, like is fine
Okay.
with he him. Like this article, the reason I was emphasizing that he is the article says he, like Grant is like endorsing the article. Like Morrison never said like I don't use he him anymore. Grant says I accepted they them. There's another interview where Grant says, "Oh, it was this badge of honor. Sure, I'm into it." But that's quite different than your trans friend who says, "Hey, like this is what I want to be called." That's a different thing. So yeah, I'm just saying like I'll probably switch between they, them, he, him. Like if someone listens to this and thinks I'm being transphobic, like fuck off. This is not that situation.
Before we go any further, it's just that this isn't like us trying to justify anything, but I figured, like with the topic at hand, I think it's a good thing to bring up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a deliberate thing, and I think that's like, trying to acknowledge it and being like, I mean, obviously, like, I'm a cis man, so I can't be like, well, my opinion, but like, um, I do think like there is a point of like, this isn't malicious, and I think that's
Right.
like important to like note if this speaking happens or
Right.
Yeah.
just shifts. Yeah.
No, like I get what people are trying to do, but like it becomes this. I hate to use this word virtue signaling, but like it's not even that. It's like it's taking good energies that would be better spent elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like
That's
making
true.
fun of these comics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we keep saying these comics. We've only referred to one, so we might actually refer to both. So we might as well talk a bit more about them. The two comics we're talking about today are Kill Your Boyfriend and Vimanarama. Both are done by Morrison and Philip Bond. Both have come out at different points in both of their careers. And for some godforsaken reason, DC thought it would be a great idea to bundle them together in one book in 2016. And I guess that is like half the reason why we're doing both books, or is it just because
No,
it's the same
I didn't
creative
know
team?
that when we
Oh,
started
okay.
this, but
Amazing.
it's fortuitous. Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's very difficult to bundle either of these, like individually. So I guess it does make sense why they would do it, but it's still a funny assortment. Just because of there are some similarities between the two, which we'll get into.
Well, yeah, you've got,
So
obviously Morrison, but Philip Bond as well.
right. So do we want to jump right into Kill Your Boyfriend then? And so
I did
you
want
take
to
the
point
lead.
out. I'm sorry.
Oh, go
I did
ahead.
want to point out like
No.
Pornsack Pizza Show is like one of the editors on this, and I found that like really really funny actually. Even though like I knew he was
Yeah.
the editor of Vertigo, it's just funny to like think that he was had to deal with this and like has gone on to write
Which
his
one
own
was
comic
it? Was
now.
it Vimanarama or Kill Your
It's just at
Boyfriend?
the very front of this collection, so I'm guessing he must have had his in
No,
both.
because I remember seeing it in one, but I forget which one it was. I think it might have
It
been
says original
Vimanarama.
series, but yeah.
Do you mind
So
saying that name again? I'm unfamiliar with this person.
Pornsack Pizza Show, he wrote The Gradation,
Oh, okay, I
Amazing.
know
The
that
Dead
book.
Boy
That's
Detectives. So
fucking
like that's what makes it
funny.
even funnier to me is like that like
Yeah.
he went on to write that.
Yeah. Yeah, let's jump
Yeah.
into Kill Your Boyfriend.
Okay,
So just
cool.
a quick overview with this. This is a one shot released in '95 through Vertigo under the Vertigo Voices line. Morrison and Bond had collab before, went on to collab again. Obviously, they had collaborated on Doom Patrol. Um, Lan, you wrote something here about Ryan Hughes. I actually don't know who that is.
Ryan Hughes is a designer. Has worked on multiple Morrison stuff, more Morrison things, I should say. Morrison's book Super Gods. The design work on that was done by Ryan Hughes. Ryan Hughes is just. I thought I'd had a bigger point with this, but I just written it down and forgotten it was there.
Oh,
Yeah, we can move on.
yeah, all
I
good.
mean, he's also spun out and done his own books now, so it's kind of fun to see
Yeah,
like
that
that, I guess.
yeah the universe that's being created out of these books is interesting.
Bond is doing on this. He's doing this book around the same time he's working on Tank Girl, so you can kind of place the work around that era. Grant is writing this book at the same time that he's starting The Invisibles. I think JLA has probably gotten off the ground yet. You can check me on that if I'm not right.
No, JLA would have
No.
been another 2 years
All right.
afterwards.
Yeah, but Grant has done some mainstream superhero stuff at this point. I think that's
Right.
worth pointing out because
Doom
this is a
Patrol,
departure in tone.
Doom Patrol, Animal Man, those have both come out. It's a
Yeah.
very like early to intermediate stage in Morrison's career, I'd say.
Yeah. And speaking of that stage, I feel it's going to be really relevant as we get through this that Grant writes this at 34.
Yes,
Just
34
you
years
just
old.
sit on that, remember that
Just
number.
think about what the average 34-year-old does, like at what point in their life they're at when they're at 34, the mindset sort of again at 34 in 1995. Just keep that in mind, store that in the back of your head.
So I can do a real easy synopsis of this book because we'll break down some of the bigger plot points within later. But basically, girl meets boy. Girl is average middle class high schooler. She's pretty frustrated with her middle class life. Boy is a roguish ruffian. They hit it off right away. Boy says, "Oh man, your life sucks. We should kill your boyfriend." They kill the girl's boyfriend. They go on a crime spree, and boy gets killed by the cops. That's basically it. I mean, fuck you if you wanted a spoiler warning. This book has been out for like 30 years. It says all that in the back pretty much anyway. Maybe not the boyfriend getting killed, but yeah,
I
because
mean,
of
I think it's fair to assume that in a book called Kill Your Boyfriend, a boyfriend will be killed.
at least one.
At least one, right?
Yeah, you deserve at least that much. So in the back there, we're not going to skip around a lot, but it's worth skipping to the afterword because critics have compared this story to Natural Born Killers. I want to come back to that for a second, but Lan, I know you wanted to address Natural Born Killers a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone came out the year before. So I guess that's why it was fresh on everyone's mind at the time. And it's weird to see the comparisons there because I can see why they would make those comparisons, you know, like the boy meets girl goes on a crime spree thing, but I think insofar as how both pieces of media handle that, like that sort of paradigm, it's apples and oranges, I think. And also I just think that Natural Born Killers is much better than this. so so there is that.
Yeah. So, getting out right away, even though it's like around the same time, it's a coincidence, and I totally believe Morrison saying that it's not Natural Born Killers.
Yeah.
Morrison then goes on to attribute another film as the primary inspiration, which this is such a fucking flub. So what it says in the afterword is, I was inspired by this movie Heartlands, starring Michael Sheen, but it could not have been the movie Heartlands because that comes out in 2002. Remember, this book comes out in like 94, 95.
And
What?
that afterward is written in 98, which is
Yeah,
weird.
it's very fucking strange I don't even know how that happens. But what Morrison is obviously trying to say is the movie Badlands by Terrence Malick, which comes out in the 1970s.
Yep. And that one stars Martin Sheen, not Michael Sheen.
Has anyone here
Which
seen
is
it?
no, Badlands, yeah, I have seen it. It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
it's
see it,
good.
Serge?
I haven't actually. I don't watch many Terrence Malick films, but yeah, I don't have anything
Me
against him. I
neither.
just don't sit through them.
I mean, Malik is great for, if I'm having trouble sleeping, but Badlands was good.
Yeah,
Badlands was good.
yeah. I'll check it out at some point, I'm sure, but haven't yet.
All right, so that's kind of the background you need on the book. Let's dive in. There's a convention that comes up right away with fourth wall breaking, where girl is constantly talking to the reader. And how'd you guys feel about that?
I think it was done very sloppily. Search.
I mean, it felt like the melodramatic teen type things that were typical of that era. I mean, like every
Yeah,
TV show was doing that, every movie was doing that, like when teens. So it just felt like this is Morrison kind of leaning into the teen genre at this point.
yeah. It's the same year that Clueless came out, I guess. So I'm not sure how much influence that had at all, but yeah, the vibe, I guess, is there.
It's for me, what's most notable is I've never thought Morrison is good at writing young women. I think he can do okay with like
I think
adult
women
women.
in general, to be honest.
Yeah, but like
A lot of these
particular.
writers in their mid 30s are like, let me write teenagers, and it's like, why? Like,
So girl is never named, boy is never named. It's intentionally nameless, and it's meant to be like this could happen anywhere in Britain. Yeah. The nicest thing I can say about this book is I really loved Bond's art. I really like an
Yeah,
artist who can commit to like a thick black outline, and I almost want to describe his work as almost polygonal. I don't mean that in like a PlayStation sense. I mean like he really
it's very
works.
angular. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
really love that. It jives with me. What about you guys?
Yeah, I really liked Bond's art in this one. He's inked by Disraeli in this one, which he's not in the next book, but in this one, I think the inks as well as Daniel Voto's colors work really, really well. It's a good conjunction. I think it's aged pretty well. And yeah, like the faces are all very, very expressive. I like how much Bond commits to sort of the cartoonishness of various expressions throughout. And yeah, like this was around the same time he was doing Tank Girl, which is like it's interesting to juxtapose the two, knowing that those were coming out in the same year. Serge, what about you?
Yeah, I like it. I think it's also neat because it starts off like feeling very hyper realistic almost, and then kind of like starts slowly getting more and more unhinged and almost unreal in some ways too. And I think that really kind of like carries the story in some ways because there's a lot of dialogue on every page, and the art is just kind of like it it's good. It just doesn't interrupt a lot, so it lets you kind of just absorb what's going on, in a very easy way.
It's really expressive, and that was probably why 20-year-old me thought there was a lot more going on in this book than there was. So one of the like first kind of windows we get into girl's mind is there's this panel that where she's kind of imagining what she'll do to vent out her frustrations, and she's in her underwear and she's got this gun and she's like slaughtered the whole room. It's something I definitely want to come back to later in terms of her characterization, what the book is trying to do there. But what I got from this is I can really see the influence of Lindsay Anderson on Grant Morrison. I know Morrison is hugely influenced by the films of Lindsay Anderson. Morrison even references, I think it's either Oh Lucky Man or If as inspiration for, I think, Bruce or the Joker's smile in Arkham Asylum. But what I'm saying is there is a film with like kids like shooting up, like going crazy and like kind of shooting up, not their school, but they're doing a shooting at their school. And I this imagery really evokes that for me.
Yeah, I can see
Yeah,
that.
it's yeah. I mean, it's funny to see it. I guess in hindsight now, because this was like 4 years before Columbine. This was before like school shootings had really become, I don't know, like a regular happenstance. I
A
guess
norm.
is that a norm? I
Yeah.
guess, or something
Yeah.
something
Sadly.
that we
Yeah.
hadn't been yeah, something that we, I guess, the people in general hadn't become sort of desensitized to yet. So like it sort of is meant to evoke this sort of like extreme idea. Also, the other thing is, again, this is happening in the UK, so having like a girl in her underwear, having shot up a school, it's very much supposed to be like this transgressive idea inside this girl's mind. And like Bond's art here is done very well, like keeping her in the foreground, and then the colors also being muted. So yeah, like I can see how it would be very transgressive in 1995. Reading it now, doesn't. It hits differently in a not necessarily a good way, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that the context for time is pretty important.
Yeah, I
So
was
we
thinking about that myself with like the post Columbine era. I'm like, ooh, this feels very weird. And again, reminding like the UK obviously has like significantly less guns, so it just feels like even stranger in that regard. But
Yeah.
so one of the other things that did not age well, I guess.
We talked a little bit about girl. She's this average middle class white girl. We see her slowly rebel and transform throughout the book. We'll talk more about her transformation later. But she meets Boy pretty soon. Boy is this. He's supposed to be this badass rogue. He's sort of James Dean-ish to paint a very general portrait. But is there anything either one of you wanted to say about the portrayal of Boy or his aesthetic or his characterization?
Very Sex Pistols, I'd say. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of. I think I'll bring this up often, but there is very much like a Sex Pistols, Johnny Rotten kind of vibe to Boy. I also got like a slight bit of Manhattan Black out of him. I don't know if
Oh,
you
I
two
see
have
that.
had that.
You mean Manchester
Yeah,
Black?
yeah, Manchester Black. Sorry. Yeah, I got a bit of Manchester Black out of him too. And yeah, he's very much, like you said, like a James Dean type of archetype. Yeah, yeah, no. I think that's all I can say.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is interesting to talk about like the punk vibe because that was so much more prominent, right, in the 90s. And like thinking about now where like, there are still people who like punk and dress like that, but like it's not as prevalent. So it does kind of make me think about that too. Like, oh, That's right. There was an era where this was like, like, being my age and everything else, like realizing I was around for the tail end of some of that stuff in the early 2000s and 90s and stuff. And it's just kind of strange to realize, like, these kind of things are almost make you feel unintentionally dated in some ways. And I don't want to keep ragging on like how some of these things haven't aged well, but like it is kind of interesting to realize some of that stuff is just like there in a way that almost seems like a time capsule.
Yeah, I like that aspect of it. Like, this is very much a 90s book. Like, so much of it is based in the culture of both the culture and the counterculture of the 90s. So there is that it's got going for it. But I think insofar as it's aging well, yeah, it's
I mentioned the characterization and look of the boy, and like, we'd all talked about how he's like punk rock, and Morrison was very much like involved in the punk scene, according to like Morrison's own record. And I've always tried to like find pictures or recordings of this band Morrison was in, the Mixers. I've only found one song. I don't know if Morrison is even on that. But because of that relationship between Morrison and punk, there's this interview I've read where Morrison says people assume that this like badass boyfriend is meant to be a stand-in for Morrison, and that's a natural assumption because the badass protagonist of Invisibles, King Mob, is obviously based on Morrison. However, according to Morrison's own account, he says that the nerdy boyfriend that they kill, who's like really into these like dragon books and always babbling on, that boy is actually closer to how he really was when Morrison was that age. I just thought that was funny.
yeah. I thought it was funny because there's the one panel where the boyfriend says, because he's got this like I think it's like a fantasy. Is it a D&D book? Is that what it is?
I think it's meant to be one of those books by a guy named Terry. I think that it's even Terry something in the book, and I've read an interview where Morrison's like, all those authors were named Terry, which is pretty funny and true.
Well,
Yeah, I have it right here. It's Terry
okay.
Punch Up, Runefest Trolls in Love. It's like a
Runefest
very
Trolls.
cliche type title.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the boyfriend says girls can read it too. The female characters are really strong and unusual, and I thought that was very funny because of how rarely that's actually the case with Morrison's own books or women in Morrison's own books.
Yeah, I
It,
mean, I've passed a Morrison book to a girlfriend before, and if you pass them something like,
damn.
well, no, I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
if you
I'm
pass
sorry.
a book,
You- sorry. Okay, go on.
you good?
No, I'm not. I'm not. What kind of
No, I mean
boyfriend
that
passes off a Morrison book to his girlfriend?
one you should probably kill. Do you remember when I said I was the worst kind of Morrison fanboy?
Yeah, I remember. I'm starting to like. I'm bringing that back to the top of my head now. Okay, go on.
But no, I mean, I'm remarking on your irony. Like, if you pass a Morrison book to a girl and it's like something like Superman, if they're like open or like Superman, they're like, "Oh, I get this. Like, this is cool. This is fun." But like, if it's anything revolving around like a woman being like the lead, like it's just like, what the fuck is this? Yeah, I mean, enough said there. But the it's important to talk about these stand-ins because this is where what is a potential stand-in for Morrison because thinking back to like, all right, so we talk about Morrison's 34 and like frankly like this is such a weird fucking book to write when you're 34. Like if a 24-year-old wrote this, I'd be like, this is kind of immature, but I get it. You're 24, like you're still working some shit out. I get why you'd still maybe be writing about high schoolers. The thing is with this book though, on the second reading, the stand-ins for Morrison that I see are not so much either boyfriend, but it's the girl herself, and it's the first person that girl and boy kill after the boyfriend. They kill this like older rich man to like steal his car or get his apartment, and it's revealed that he's like some kind of cross dresser. And there's like a lot of really loaded dialogue about people hiding these habits. And when girl tries on some of the like the wigs and the dresses that this cross-dressing guy has, she even has this line where she says, "I feel like a transvestite." There's a line even later in the book about like men wanting to like fuck anyone who's dressed like a woman, like men being inherently queer. So all of that for me is just to say, I think Morrison is like really working through some suppressed or possibly closeted issues here in this book. And because of how complicated that can be in the 90s, being British, I kind of get more of like why this book is so fucking strange and stilted.
Yeah, I think that context definitely adds a lot, an extra layer to this. Like later on, Boy and Fudge, which is the leader of the artist bunch, they talk about Giovanni's Room, which is a classic James Baldwin book about like gay lovers, and there is like a lot of queer, not even subtext. It's like on the page, things going on here. So it's weird. I guess it's not weird, but it's more so. I'm refraining from using the word interesting because it's more. You can definitely see that Morrison is working through something here. But
Yeah, I kind of take it as Morrison kind of navigating the opposing forces of like countercultures and different things in um their lifetime. Like, because I mean, we started with punk, and like Dungeons and Dragons, and we kind of like mature into like, and even the Giovanni's Room thing is like in this like Merry Pranksters type '60s environment with like some guy who kind of looks like I don't know if he's supposed to be like a stand-in for just generic black music in general or like Easy E or like
not
what that
easy.
look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's
remember
like
you sent me that. You sent me that panel after reading.
yeah, yeah. I'm just like I didn't want to post it online because I did not want to like spoil anything about this or post anything about it, but I had to send it to somebody. But like that character, like there's also like a single black figure in like the Brotherhood of Dada. So I kind of feel like this is more of like almost like a self-awareness extension of like Doom Patrol in some ways, where it's like exploring all these weird ideas and like how they're kind of all just swirling into this world together. So I could see Morrison kind of as a stand-in of the girl, in the sense of like just kind of going through all these different like phases or like encountering all these different ideas and kind of like just going with it or not knowing what to go with or what to internalize almost.
Yeah, and I think with the way it ends off too, like again, fuck you if you haven't if you're genuinely afraid of spoilers for this, but at the end we see an older version of girl as sort of this like meek housewife, who obviously isn't as meek as we think her to be initially, but I think again with the comments of Morrison being 34 at this time, it's kind of funny to see. It's like, oh yeah, after all that, this is where she ends up. Is that supposed to be like Morrison saying like after all that time and all that sort of like exploration of youth in general, is like this is where I'm at right now.
That's how I read it. I mean, this is like definitely getting into the politics of the book, right? Like that is alluded to in a line of dialogue. She says like when she's a teenager, she says, "Shake a person up enough, and what they thought was a personality starts to separate. We can be anything. I'm a page 3 girl. I'm a Warhol superstar. I'm a dyke. I'm a riot girl. I'm the queen of sex. I'm a housewife with a jar of rat poison." Through the story, we see girl take on all of those personas. And I completely agree with Serg, where you can kind of see some of these ideas of Doom Patrol, like losing your identity. A lot of that comes up in Invisibles as well. Where that starts to fall apart for me a little bit in this book is trying to figure out what like the politics of this are. Because I read that statement and it's kind of like, oh, I contain multitudes. I can be anything. But like if you can be anything and become anything at any time, for me that kind of sounds like, well, what are you really? Like what do you actually stand for as a person? Not to say people can't contain multitudes, but like
Yeah.
Morrison's politics in this are so wishy-washy.
There's a point where it's like almost kind of mocked, where like the like whatever we want to call those merry pranks, or people are like lectured about praxis and how like to properly move, but like
It's so goofy.
it's like so goofy and so stilted, but it's not like like the protagonists were like supposed to be sympathetic to have any other refutation either. So it's just kind of like what is going on here? What is
That's
happening?
exactly my issue with it, man. It's like these merry pranksters are supposed to be like the bad leftists or the hypocritical leftists. But like you said, there's no refutation to that.
And you never really see either boy or girl get stripped down to like the actual core of what their characters are. You know, like there's a lot of like archetypes being thrown around, and again, like you said, contains multitudes, but none of those multitudes really paint any sort of picture about who girl is or what she stands for. Like at the climax, when at the very end when they're on top of that tower, I feel like that's the perfect point for them to really strip back all the layers and be like, at the core, this is who girl is, this is who boy is, and you never really get that.
Well, that is the problem. Is like he does this. Morrison can throw in these like genius plot twists that you have to really think about, like really pay attention to and connect the pieces to get like fuller meanings. And sometimes he fucking fumbles it really bad. Unfortunately, he does it really well here. And the problem with doing it well is he like kind of subverts his own story. Because in the reviews of this book, a lot of people's reviews are at odds with what ours. A lot of people's reviews are, oh, don't think about it too much, man. This is a story about young love and like getting really high and fucked up and just how the world feels then. Like, I hear that. I can see that. I can just enjoy a dumb, fun thing. But the reveal here, where we strip these people down to what they really are, is layered into the beginning when we see the parents, the girl's parents, arguing with each other. This is a frictious relationship. There is this argument where the wife is calling out the husband for like dirty magazines or whatever. Then he shoots back at her, oh yeah, what about that package you sent to the orphanage? Clearly implying that like she fucking abandoned a baby that she had. And it's not clear whether the dad is the father or not, but like she's really offended by this. She's like, you weren't supposed to bring this up. It's never revisited until that climax. After Boy is shot by the cops, he hands these postage stamps to Girl. Now I gotta interrupt myself and say, like, this totally went over my head when I was a kid and I first read this. But reading it now,
whoa. This went over my head when I read this like two days ago. What the fuck?
it's insane. It's an insane reveal. But he goes, please, I want you to have this. He's bleeding out on this tower. He says, I want you to have this. This is the only. He says something like, this is the only like thing I have that means anything to me. My mom left this with me at the orphanage.
Oh no.
Dude, he passes her the fucking stamps on the box. Girl has been fucking her long lost brother or half brother the whole time. Like, what the shit, dude?
The funniest part about all that too is like it's like this huge reveal, but like right before that, he's like, we didn't even get to do anal, and like now here's just like it's like wait what? like it's just like such a bizarre twist in a twist.
Like, it's absolutely a reveal that has no purpose other than to be transgressive. And that's my whole issue with this book is like, there's this whole idea of like being transgressive. This is a transgressive book. And there's a, like halfway through when they're calling like the merry pranksters, the artists out for their fake transgressiveness. It's all surrounded by faux transgressive things that they do, like fucking on top of a hearse. It's oh my god. Yeah, like I said, this is a great book for nerds and Sex Pistols fans to live vicariously through. It's
basically that that shirt that says "You laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because we're all the same," and that's
Yes.
like the whole politics.
Yes.
Like Grant Morrison saw that shirt and was like, "I'm going to write a whole comic about this," and that's what it is.
God, this is like I wanted to even say this is like a Joker fan kind of book, but like even Joker fans at least have the sort of like minuscule self-awareness to be like, okay, we're doing this for shits and giggles. Whereas this is like, yeah, we're gonna fuck on top of a hearse. We're gonna dress up a corpse and drag, you know. And at the very core of it, it's just dumb. It's just dumb. I don't know.
It is.
Like,
It is. No, it's just dumb. There's.
it's just
It's
dumb.
it's
Yeah.
ideas. It's an idea here, an idea there, but none of those ideas weave together in a satisfying or revealing way. The last big idea I want to talk about with this is mythology. Now, when I say I was a Morrison fanboy, this is where I get a little redemption. Is I got into the study of mythology partly because of Grant Morrison. I think where like I started to, in bits and pieces, see the light and like not be totally mesmerized by the aura of Morrison was when I started to slowly realize that I had learned more about mythology than Morrison himself. And that's where this book just shits the bed again. In the introduction, we do the classic trope of the protagonist is sitting in her high school classroom and the teacher is droning on about a theme that will come up later. The teacher is talking about Dionysus and specifically the real world cult of Dionysus, where these bands of women would be, enraptured by Dionysus. They would just be consumed by frenzy. They would get drunk. They would have really like orgiastic sex, and they would commit these wild acts of violence, chopping people up, insane shit. Morrison talks about this in the afterword. He talks about being inspired by Dionysus, and he has these images of women, like young high school women, like cutting up school counselors with knives and like committing all these insane acts of terrorism and violence to parents and guardians. That in itself, I think, is a fascinating idea if these women were inspired by a Dionysus-like figure. That is not what happens in the book. In the book, girl just follows fucking boy as he does all this shit. And the whole time she's like, wow, that's fucking crazy, dude. You just shot that guy. But she doesn't do any of that herself.
Yeah, and at the end, she even brings up, "I haven't actually killed anybody."
Yeah.
Yeah. At the end, it should have been like when she gives her the stamps and she realizes they might be related, she just pushes them off. Like I thought that would have been like a really funny way to do like the end of it.
That would have been
But
awesome.
Yeah, that would've
like
been dope.
yeah, but like we said, Morrison is not necessarily the best author of women, and
Yep.
I think like the only thing she actually does is like poison her husband as a housewife, and that's like the only thing she actually like, the only agency she actually has in the stories feels like at any point.
And we don't
Yeah,
even
like
really
they're
get
at
to
the
see that.
No, we don't. We just sort of see the pre-action, I guess. And this is why the narration's also really funny to me is that like whenever boy's doing all these things, girl just turns to the camera and was like, "Well, that just happened." It's like
She
I
just
didn't
like
think you'd do that.
she does the Jim face from The Office at the camera.
Yes,
It's just like, oh,
exactly.
She's just turning the movie like she turns to the camera like, damn, my life a movie for real.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, the
this
misunderstanding of mythology.
yeah, this book does not understand mythology. It doesn't understand Dionysus. So it's just kind of a crock of shit in that sense. I mean, it's a huge fail. Like you could say something interesting about Dionysus, about like being in an altered state, and it doesn't really have anything there. It's a problem that comes up in other Morrison books that have different tones too, where you'll read a Morrison book and then you'll read an interview, and then he'll say something completely different in the interview than what happens in the book. Um, that's it. That's all I got for Kill Your Boyfriend. Anything else you
Yeah,
guys
I
wanted to add?
mean, art's good. Art's nice. Art's dope.
yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't read this unless you're like one of those people that like has to read everything. You know, it's
Yeah.
not everything that Morrison toys with in this can be found better in other comics. I guess is the way to say
You
it.
know what? I disagree. In trying to read other books from this era, he does this even worse in a book called Saint Swithin's Day. Do you know this one?
No, I don't know this
No.
one.
Should we do like a follow-up episode where we do this one?
No, I can do this in 1 minute. This dude is
Oh,
very much
sick.
like the merry pranksters. Oh, Lan, by the way, I want you to talk about who these merry pranksters actually are in a second.
Oh yeah, so there
Yeah.
was this show in the UK when Morrison was younger, called The Double Deckers. It's just like a Bill Nye the Science Guy type show about like these kids who again, I must reiterate, kids who live in a double decker bus and go around like doing science shit and like fun little cultural shit. And
Like a good show for
Morrison was
babies.
so, yeah, a good show for babies, right? And Morrison was so enraptured about becoming one of the double deckers. And obviously, as we know now, Morrison did not become one of the double deckers. And this apparently has fueled a sort of, I don't know, vengeance, rage. Uh, no, regardless, he turns the double deckers into the merry pranksters in this book. The merry pranksters are supposed to be the sort of like parody of the double deckers, and again, extremely goofy, extremely goofy.
Extremely goofy.
That's all I
at
have.
30, extremely
At
goofy.
34,
At 34
yes, at
to be
34.
motivated by like a show you watched as a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, move on.
It was like Andy Warhol and Eazy-E and like some guy in a Gibbs suit also in it. And like,
Yeah, what did Eazy-E do to Grant Morrison? That's what I want to know.
yeah,
What did Eazy-E do to Grant Morrison?
But in this book, they're portrayed as like these impotent leftists. They say like, "Oh, we've got a grenade, but the grenade is more of a symbol. We're not actually going to use it to blow up anything." That's what Saint Swithin's Day is, and that was why I said, when you said there's other books that do this better, I'm like, there's also books that do this worse. Because in Saint Swithin's Day, this boy who is based on Grant Morrison is like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill Maggie Thatcher." And he's like gets a gun. He's like following Maggie Thatcher around, and the whole book is just kind of like following his descent into madness. He finally catches up to Maggie Thatcher's motorcade, and he draws his gun. Oh, but what's his gun? It's just his finger, and he says "bang." On his forehead is written "Neurotic Boy Outsider," and he's tackled by Maggie's fucking security team. Woo! Like, again, just like you had something
He just
really
has
interesting
neurotic
there.
boy outsider written on his forehead, like Jared Leto's Joker.
Yeah, like
Oh,
damage.
okay. Like damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what. Okay.
But it
Okay.
says neurotic boy outsider, and it's just
I feel like that's
very
worse than
much-
putting damage.
It's so stupid, and it's again this example of Morrison like seeing like activism or like more extreme politics just as
watch this
aesthetic
one
choices.
Scorsese film.
Yeah.
Like making it your whole personality for a decade.
Yeah, anyways, that's a digression just to say Morrison was on one in the 90s, and then you can imagine a fast forward sound here 10 years later. Morrison ends up getting
still
on one
one.
again.
Back at it again.
Oh man.
Which brings us to Vimanarama.
Our second book, and I mentioned the notes here. There's a commonality between Kill Your Boyfriend and Vimanarama in that the story at hand doesn't map to the culture at hand, but the culture is being mapped onto the story. And I think that's a great way to tie these books together, even if DC didn't mean it. It's like a double feature of misunderstandings and just complete banality.
Yeah,
So
the
yes,
deluxe edition is
Vimanarama.
like, oh god, I was gonna say this deluxe
Yeah,
edition just feels like if you have shitty taste, you're gonna love these two books.
Yeah, if you're a true Morrison fan, sit through this.
Yeah.
Sit with yourself. Think about what you
Give us
did.
your money, you hapless stooge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Vimanarama. Let's run it through this. So it's a 3-issue miniseries. It came out in 2005. It's the 4th and final collaboration between Morrison and Bond. They'd worked together on the Invisibles between this and Kill Your Boyfriend. And again, 2005. You have to consider what was going on around that time. This came out at the same time as Sea Guy, We 3, and the beginning of Morrison's Seven Soldiers run. And it was actually shortly after Marvel had put out Spider-Man India. And you're wondering why I mentioned this. It'll be relevant. Phil Bond is back again on our duties for this one. Bond was... Here's a crazy fact.
So heartbreaking.
This is insane to me. Bond was originally meant to work on We 3, and everyone knows We 3. Even if you're like a comics fan in passing, I feel like We 3 is something... It's just like... It's entered the comics canon online, I guess, if you will. So Bond was originally meant to work on We 3, but Morrison, and I quote, had this other idea that he thought I would be great for. This is Bond saying this. And the other idea that he thought that Bond would be great for was Vimanarama, and We 3 ended up going to Quietly. And so you're wondering, okay, now what's the big catch? You said this was 10 years or 11 years after Kill Your Boyfriend. Again, if we do math, Grant Morrison in 2005 is 45. 45. Okay, again, keep it in the back of your mind. What does the average person do at 45? What's going through their minds? What are they... Is this what exactly are you thinking when you do a book like this at such an age?
Can I say something about Bond
here?
Go
for it.
Bond getting passed on We 3 to do Vimanarama, reminds me so much of Sean Connery passing on Saruman in The Lord of the Rings to go do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I was going to bring up League of Extraordinary Gentlemen because I was waiting for the right moment to drop that, because I do feel like this might have led to why Dark Dossier has the gollywog in it now. That's my new theory of the rivalry taking place of who can out racist the other.
Yeah, so the etymology of the title here, Vimanarama, is Vimana, which is a mythical chariot from Indian culture, and Rama, which is, Rama, like the Greek word orama, which just means spectacle or a sight. So it basically just translates to a spectacle of chariots. So the numbers, some of you might know the answer to this, but guess how many South Asian or Muslim creators were involved with this book? Do either of you know? I know if you're looking at the show notes, you know, but take a guess.
Even if I hadn't looked at the show notes, I would have pictured a very round, very hollow 0.
Serg, do you think the same?
No, I think this was extremely progressive, and they had sensitivity readers and a whole crew and years of research to write this story. I'm sorry, I can't even say it with a straight face.
Yeah, a big fat goose egg for the number of South Asian and Muslim creators involved with this book. It is entirely a book written by 2 white folks. And Salty, you've written the show notes here that it precipitates Morrison's big Wonder Woman book that was also all white guys, which I thought was pretty funny.
It is funny.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's like, why did you feel the need for this? I haven't even read that Wonder Woman book. I don't have an opinion on it either way. It's very interesting that Morrison became the diversity hire. You know what I'm saying? It's like a less problematic Joss Whedon in a way.
But it's between that and 18 Days and it hurts my head. It's the only thing I can say. It hurts my head. I literally wrote down in the show notes, someone call Edward Said. Because that's how much I need to bring this man back to life just to... Okay, so pretext. So there's a bunch of Morrison interviews around this time. going into the culture surrounding this book and sort of the mindset that they had going into this book. So the first point the first quote I want to bring up is, "The seed was planted after 9/11." Great start, by the way. After 9/11, when I started reading up on Muslim culture in an effort to comprehend the world political and religious situation a little more clearly. I can't believe it took 9/11 for Morrison to do that. Apart from the Sufi mystical fringe, I'd never been interested in Islam at all, but I found a rich vein of visionary weirdness that I'd never known was there. Visionary weirdness. I began to research the early history of Pakistan, which took me back to the fabled and mythical Rama Empire, said to exist 6,000 years ago. Vimanas are the name given to the flying machines of the Rama Empire. Detailed descriptions of these machines can be found in the Mahabharata and other early Indian epics, as well as in more recent books of speculative archaeology. And here we've quoted David Hatcher Childress's Vimana Aircraft of Ancient India and Atlantis is a useful source book. And from these scraps of research material, I began to piece together the idea for a story of romance and apocalypse set in a strictly Mohammedan milieu.
I don't want my milieus any other way. I want them strictly Mohammedan.
Yeah, I want my milieus Mohammedan. Yeah,
I love how he's like, post 9/11, I went to investigate the Mohammedans. And like, no one uses that term, and I haven't used that term in a long time. And he decided, I'm going to drop it in there.
Post 9/11. Post 9/11, I want to show you how Muslims can fly a big aircraft, but it can be cool.
Oh man,
yeah.
That's how this feels.
And again, nowhere in this are we bringing up Hinduism whatsoever. So continuing on with this quote, Islam frowns on representational art, and I'd imagine that for some sects, comics are possibly the most blasphemous art form imaginable. I just like the idea of taking all the pomp and high holiness of one of the world's great religions and turning it into a Jack Kirby comic.
Grant Morrison said, "Je suis Charlie."
Oh man.
Oh Lord.
You could write a book on just that paragraph.
You really fucking could.
That paragraph, like, if I was in Yu-Gi-Oh, that would have been a direct hit to my life points. I would go,
Grant Morrison said, Grant Morrison said, "I'm going to be the next Rudyard Kipling," and just went about doing that.
Okay. Well, there's a 2005 entry. Go ahead.
Well, hold on. I think I want to do that 2005 interview, definitely. I think this is a good time to talk about the Kirby influence, or do you want to do that later?
Yeah, you know what? I'll let you. Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to mention? Because again, this is a Kirby-inspired book, so.
Yeah. So he says, like, I got these super these nebulously Muslim or possibly Hindu super gods, and I'm like, what if I turned it into a Jack Kirby team? And just as someone who's read a lot of Jack Kirby, just turning the page and getting to the Jack Kirby spread is so fucking bizarre, because it's mimicking all the aesthetics of Kirby, the costumes and like the way the team is represented on the page, their stances, even the way that Prince Ben Rama, the sort of Superman or Thor of the team, talks is exactly like Stan Lee Thor. And you read this and you're like, why Jack Kirby, bro? Like, Jack Kirby was doing like Greek stuff, Norse stuff. Like, Kirby never expressed an interest in like these cultures. And the one time he did, he wrote that recently recovered manuscript called The Horde. And I'm not canceling Kirby. I don't fucking care who you cancel either way. But like, I just want to read this blurb on The Horde, where it's called The Horde, a visionary novel by Jack Kirby. Quote, "The Oriental shall come forth from his seat to pass the mountains to France. He shall pass fire through the sky, the waters and snow, and shall strike everyone with his rod. which is like a Nostradamus quote. But like that's so fucking racist, man. It's just so weird you would pick Jack Kirby. Like, not that we knew Kirby was like had huge racism problems at the time, but like why didn't you pick like I don't know any other Asian creator in comics to pick your influence from?
Well, I mean, I guess the point to be made there is that, it was 2005, and it's not like there was a series of books the year before that took a superhero and put him in an Indian context or anything, one Spider-Man India or anything. It's not like that existed or anything, but just it's funny that Kirby is the influence that Morrison went for with this book, because in some ways it's almost the only influence that you can see.
Yeah.
So yeah, this 2005 interview with Newsarama, they say every single character in this is either Pakistani or a god. The sprawling family structure of this book is the kind of thing I rarely write about, and the huge cast of babies, grannies, aunts, uncles, brothers, and sisters provided me with a lot of opportunities for weird comedy. Know that, yeah, it provided you with a lot of opportunities, none of which were taken.
When I think weird comedy, I think about big Pakistani families.
Who's really weird and funny? Muslims. Then they go on to say there are devout Muslims in the book, and there are couldn't care less Muslims, so everybody gets a shout. Basically, I did all my research, but you won't see much of it in the book. You're telling us.
Right?
You're telling us. I mean, yeah, I didn't see it. Research my ass. All the concepts are translated, so Allah is referred to in the text as God and Hajj as pilgrimage, for example, in an effort to avoid the stuffy, self-aware, and again in quotations, ethnicity of using Arabic phrases for color. The Ultra Hadin are my own creations based on stories of angels in the Quran and earlier pre-Islamic texts, while some hoary old ideas like Atlantis are given a new slap of paint and cast in a distinctly Islamic light. But apart from that, I think the story is human enough at its core to mean something to anyone who's ever been a teenager in the grip of immense and ridiculous forces beyond one's control or understanding.
Apart from the Muslim part, it's actually quite human. Trust me.
Yeah. Everything's human except Muslims, according to Morrison.
It's like that other interview segment. You could just do a whole podcast on this fucking interview blurb, man.
Again, I get it. It's 2005. The world opinion of Muslims was not high. Just in general, it's not high at all, But holy fuck. Holy fuck.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so you mentioned here that a good thing to contrast now before going into this is 18 Days in Avatar X. So, reader, viewer, listener, you may be surprised to know that this was not the only time that Grant Morrison dipped their toes into South Asian culture. So first there's the 18 Days art book from Graphic India, where Morrison alongside Mukesh Singh, again, this was in 2010, so 2 years after Final Crisis, like a year before New 52 and Action Comics and whatnot. And basically it's more or less the same story beats as what? Assault.
I meant it was the same story beats as Final Crisis.
Oh, it's Final Crisis. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with 18 Days is it's supposed to be this sort of reimagining of the Mahabharata,
Right.
but done in superhero fashion, which I'll get into later. But the Mahabharata is uniquely not a Muslim text.
What?
I know, surprising, right? And then there was an 18 Days motion comic apparently that also came out a few years later, and as Salt is quoted, it's not good. And
It
then in
only took
26
20 chapters to figure it out.
Oh, okay.
No, I
And
knew it
then in
wasn't good.
26
I thought it would get
Oh,
good.
oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I saw 18 Days in like shelves when I was in high school, and I saw like Morrison's name attached to it, but I never felt compelled to actually like pick up the book and read it. And now
Well,
I feel vindicated.
Well, the thing that's fucking nuts about 18 Days to me, I don't know that much about the Mahabharata, but like, and I know I'm not saying that right. I'm sorry. This is Flub
That's
Nation.
fine.
That's what it is.
That's
But
fine.
it's like Kurt Busiek's Astro City. It's Grant Morrison's 18 Days, and it's like, have you seen Mukesh Singh's artwork? Like, it doesn't have to be your style, but clearly this dude put so much fucking time into this. Like, like Grant Morrison was on like Mahabharata Wikipedia. Like,
Yeah,
shits
it's
this
like
out.
this is Grant Morrison's 18. It's the white creator. I'm putting on my
Oh
hat. I'm
man.
putting on. I'm getting all my. I'm putting on my salwar. It's the white man with their name on the book. It's. Come on, liberate yourself. So that's not the only other book. Morrison, they also put out Avatar X in 2016. Uh, an original Indian superhero, if you will. It's
I
another
read it.
collab with. You read it? I didn't read this one. I didn't read this
You
one.
don't read it.
Okay, cool. we're delving into sheer madness right now. So this is another collab with Graphic India in a partnership that also included, you believe it or not, Stan Lee.
And wait for it. Drum roll, please.
Deepak Chopra.
Woo!
Woo! Deepak Chopra. And a portion of these books were donated to Doctors Without Borders to fund education for young women in India to become doctors. And you said no one read this. You're right. No one did read this. And there's a quote that Morrison gave in regards to the Doctors Without Borders fundraiser. And they say, I believe that educated young women are our world's best hope for the future, and I'm very proud to be working with Graphic India and Humble Bundle to support World Reader and Doctors Without Borders in the all-important fight against poverty, lack of medicine, and illiteracy in India.
Yeah, so
This
what
is a
really
chance.
happened? You know what really happened here was whoever like was working for graphic policy, who got Grant Morrison the job. This person at Graphic India, I think it's like graphic policy. This person at Graphic India who got Grant the job, they said, "Oh shit, my department might get shut down, but if I can get like a grant, like lowercase g grant, that was not meant to be a pun. If I can get a grant from Doctors Without Borders or some other organization, I can like pay to keep my department open." And then through like money laundering ways, they probably sent $10 to Doctors Without Borders for this book. That's my theory,
Hell
anyway.
yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, the rest of that quote is useless, but I think now is a good time as any to bring up Grant's own thoughts on the Indian comic scene. And there's 3 quotes, I think, here, or is this all
So
just
cool.
one quote?
It's I chopped it up a little bit. You can
Okay.
just
Okay.
I took out the irrelevant parts.
So the first, that must have been a lot of parts then. So there's 3 parts here. The first one says, it seems to me, mostly from reading the papers and watching the news, I must admit, that there's a much more progressive and positive feeling in some of the countries of the East, like India and China. In the West, at the moment, the future is something to be feared. In the East, it's something to look forward to.
Vibes only.
Good vibes only. Edward Said, suck a cock. Grant Morrison said their piece. Part 2. For me, the superhero has always been a crude and hopeful representation of how the human future might look if we don't blow ourselves up. The reactionary soldier superhero of the West has his place, but I'd like to see the kinds of superheroes who might arise from cultures with a little more faith in tomorrow. Wow. And finally, at a time when I feel I've said about as much as I have to say about the American superhero, again, this is what, 2012?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so think of how many superhero comics Morrison's put out since. As much as I have to say about the American superhero, Avatar X is an opportunity to reimagine the entire concept through a different cultural lens. And the subtext here is it's a cultural lens that they don't belong to.
Would it surprise you to hear, Lan, that the protagonist of Avatar X is another neurotic boy outsider, but remixed East Asian style, like Ali?
Oh boy. Oh boy. And rounding out all the quotes, the Morrison quotes leading into this, there's one from a Hollywood Reporter interview where they say, as a kid, I was a huge fan of the Beatles, and when they got into meditation, sitars, and Indian culture, I was inspired years later as a teenager to do the same. And again, the key word here is Indian culture. Okay, keep that in the back of your head. And then you've noted, Salt, that this wouldn't be the last time that Morrison created an Eastern in the sense of hemisphere, we can just say an Orientalist, I guess in this case, super team. And in Final Crisis, Morrison would create a Japanese Justice League called Super Young Team. Surprising.
Yeah, it sucks.
Morrison also missed the mark there.
It's so weird because it's like Grant is like, I don't know, in his like 40s or 50s by the time he does Final Crisis, and it's like, dude, you could have looked at so many Japanese comics or toku shows like we've been watching, and like the Super Young Team with like the Superman Batman mashup and all the other Japanese analogs, the American characters, like they don't feel Japanese.
No, and it's funny because, like just 5 or 6 years later, we get New Superman from DC, which is written by Gene Luen Yang, and just a nice murder's row of great artists, as well as Vic Bogdanovich, which does the whole concept way better. The difference
is that book is cool, and that character is cool.
That book is cool. It's written by an actual Asian creator. It's crazy what hiring someone that's actually familiar with the culture will do for your book if you actually fucking hire one.
I'm also just amazed that Chris Claremont is still like the high point for white guys in diversity comics. And like,
oh yeah,
no matter how cringe he gets, he's still better than everybody else at it for some reason.
God. All right, so let's get into the book. Surprising no one, it's not good. It's not good. One might even say, what the hell happened here?
We'll be asking very frequently, what happened here?
So the main characters in this book are a suicidal young Shiite boy. Where did you get Shiite from? Because I didn't get anything in this book about him being Shiite. So
dude,
tell me, where does it say that he's Shiite? Where does it say that he's a Shiite Muslim?
I want you to guess, Serg or Lan, where do you think I found the answer that Ali is Shiite?
It's either in the there's no afterward, so it can't be in the afterward.
No afterward. I didn't find it in the book. There's your spoiler.
It's probably in an interview, isn't it?
It's in an interview! You can't do that!
Amazing.
You can't write a character that way. That's like, regardless of cultural insensitivity, like that's just done. You can't do that, bro.
He said he did his research that you're never gonna see, so I guess you're right.
I guess that piece of research just didn't make it to the page.
I threw the Shiite thing to give you brain damage. You're welcome.
Cool, thanks, man. My life points have been hit directly. So it's about our neurotic. What was it? Neurotic
boy outsider, written by our neurotic boy Orientalist.
In this case, it's a neurotic brown boy outsider named Ali and his extended family and the girl they've arranged for him to marry. That's my first point with this book. Is like,
that's so fucked up. Why would you do that?
It's fine to do it. Okay, here's the thing. This is another book that takes place in the UK. I have family that lives in the UK, so I know what it's like to be a South Asian person in the UK. And arranged marriages happen. That's normal. How is that like the crux? The just okay.
Look,
I need
it's
to
fucked
work
up
through
that-
this. I need to work through this. So yeah, okay. So Ali is family. The girl they've arranged for him to marry, Sophia, and the group of godlike super beings called the Ultra Hadin, and you've written them down as monstrous petrochemical bad guys. They're just devils. They're just devils. Their whole
I didn't write
point
that.
is
This
they're-
is all the. This is the quote.
No,
this is still
no,
a quote
this
from
is a
Morrison.
quote. This
Yeah,
is a-
I didn't make this up.
Ooh! No.
This is okay. We need to read the whole quote, then you get to unpack it.
Okay,
All right, and
okay,
I'll get to do
sure,
the
sure.
Morrison voice here, and you guys can tell me if I got it right. All right. So we go.
Go for it.
There's also a group of godlike super beings called the Ultra Hadin and some monstrous petrochemical bad guys. Atlantis gets raised, gigantic spider temples war with cathedral tanks on the green fields of England. And the question is finally answered. Islam or Christianity? Which is the strongest? I think I did all right until that last couple words with that
way.
impression.
Morrison said this.
Yeah, this is from 2005 or maybe 2002, but it's an early 2000s Newsarama interview where he said India versus Pakistan, but he did Islam versus Christianity.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, dude, I didn't make up.
I thought the Islam or Christianity was just like you being cheeky with this.
No,
note.
dude, this is Morrison.
Hold on. Let me just rearrange my mind for what. Oh Lord. Okay. So, not that I think anyone should be reading Vimanarama, but the gist of the story is there's this boy Ali. I say boy, he's like 20 something. He's waiting to see his arranged bride, Sophia. He hasn't met her yet. And while he's waiting, the world goes to shit because his nephew, a baby, somehow ends up finding an underground mystic city full of superpowered beings and unleashes a great evil upon the world. And the whole story is about, like him trying to prevent the apocalypse or whatever other big fucking trope there was in the 2000s. So yeah, the thing is, Ali is supposedly Muslim. There's very little in this book that indicates that Ali and his family are Muslim. You see his dad and his brother, they're wearing it's a kufi hat. And, like, they're all dressed up, I guess, like you would a stereotypical Muslim family, like a devout, stereotypical Muslim family. And Ali himself is dressed up like a regular UK brown boy, I'd say. And, God, okay, so at the very beginning of the book, right, when Ali's going to save his brother, there is this two-page spread, because the panel before is like you see him getting on the bike and there's these girls in the background playing volleyball and there's two cops there, right? And then in the two-page spread, the girls are like arranged as though they're doing some kind of Bollywood dance.
So are the cops.
And so are the cops. The cops too. And then the craziest thing is that there is a plane in the background, and the only buildings you see, like, beyond the foreground of, the array of houses are two towers.
Oh, shit. I didn't notice that.
I did not even catch that.
Two towers,
man.
a plane, and it's literally headed right towards it.
That's so cool.
So that already sets a high bar for what this book is going to be. Right? Before we go on, Bond's art in this, fine. It's all right. Like, it's good. it lacks the punch that it had in Kill Your Boyfriend. I think like Disraeli is not inking him here, so the lines feel a lot lighter. It feels a lot less angular, and also it's been 10 years, so obviously his art style has changed a bit more. The colors, I think,
Coloring doesn't work for me in this book.
Yeah, it. There are points where it works for me, I guess, like earlier on, but it's in that like weird phase where comics were like starting to get a better understanding of like what digital coloring was. Yeah, it's like serviceable at best. There's a really bad lens flare through. Actually, I'm looking through it now. Like 2-3 pages. There's like some really bad lens flares. And also the coloring on the Vimanas in question in this book. Surprise! There's a lot of Vimanas in Vimanarama. It all stinks. It's bad. The coloring on the Vimanas are bad. Shit. Serg, what do you think?
I mean, it felt like since they realized all their characters were like brown, they had to like match everything to that, and it really threw them off.
Is that something
like,
you've seen in other books, Serge?
I mean, I don't know. It just feels like it also feels like in the early 2000s, I think a lot of comics kind of had like a cartoony vibe to them. So it feels like how Ultimate Spider-Man looked, right? Like where like it
Yeah,
almost kind of looked cartoonish in a way that like seems
but
emblematic of that era, and it's weird to see it.
I think it's like just a bit beyond that because the white characters in this book, the three of them there are in this book, don't have like hot dog colored skin, which I felt like is more indicative of that time. So it's like the post 2000s era almost. It's like
Fair,
this weird
fair.
transitional fugue state, I think, for me.
Yeah,
Yeah, the coloring on the brown people, the South Asians, I should say, it's like the coloring is very flat, I'd say. So I can't really complain about it, but yeah, coloring is serviceable.
it
at
just
best.
doesn't pop in a way that like it just
Yeah,
doesn't do anything for me in that. Yeah,
yeah, like the whole idea is that you're supposed to feel this sort of grandeur whenever the Ultra Hadeen or the demons are on the screen, and you never really get that.
Well,
yeah,
You
it
never.
doesn't work for me because what I'm comparing this to aesthetically is a Jack Kirby or Walt Simonson Thor or Avengers book.
Mm,
And this just doesn't have that pop. Like those books are like crispy and like they're like practically glowing. You know what I mean? That's not here.
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're glowing here, but it's more like a radiation. Like something's wrong. Someone fell in a vat of something.
Yeah.
So, off the bat, the character dialogue in this book is bad, grating. There's so many quirky jokes throughout. This is like, I guess this is technically at the peak of Whedon's popularity, right?
Yeah.
There is a
Yeah.
lot of Whedonisms like throughout this. Like early on in the book, he says like, "If she's ugly, I'm hanging myself. Looking for a baby." Like,
The looking for a baby thing is just like the lamest double entendre because they're looking for the baby that has been lost. But like, we also know these two are fated to get up to like quirky rom-com hijinks. It's so fucking weak, man.
yeah, and like when he finally realizes that the girl he's with is his arranged bride, he says, "Wait a minute, you're Sophia, and you're not ugly." It's like, you're a girl and a gamer?
I mean, it's a very
Uh,
piss poor recreation of like Peter Parker discovering that Mary Jane Watson is hot.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I do
Except
I
there's
do
not
feel
even...
like a lot of this. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I do feel like a lot of this is trying to like make Ali like every other like youngish or early 20s ish hero. And like
Yeah,
so they
there's
just like he
nothing...
doesn't really have a personality. He just says things that like Peter Parker would say or like,
He
things
doesn't
like
have
that.
he doesn't have a personality, nor does he have a culture. There's nothing about
Yeah.
his character that screams Muslim. You know, like
Or Shiite.
Even if he's, yeah, sorry, Shiite. Like I know lapsed Muslims. I have friends that are lapsed Muslims, and even they still have that sort of, I guess it's tenuous, but it's a tether, I should say, a tether to their culture, just because of, you know, them being around their families and just having that baked into them. None of that is here. None of that. There's like, Ali could easily be a white guy named Steve, and the story would not change fundamentally.
It would arguably
sure,
be better.
You might question why his marriage is getting arranged, but other than that, there's nothing that would change if Ali was.
I'm imagining like Steve Martin's The Jerk, where he's like raised with a black family, and the Muslim family. That would be really good.
You mean I'm going to stay this color forever?
Yeah, so the pacing in this book is also awful. Like, I think it's in the... Oh, it's right after he saves his brother. He talks about having existential dread, but nothing from any page before that ever indicates as such. There's nothing going on in his head in the, I think it's like 5 or 6 pages before that indicates that he has any sort of existential dread. He's just like a depressed guy in the UK. Ooh. I mean, I would be too if I lived in the UK, but it's so, yeah, just, there was actually, I went to the UK in 2016, and I don't know what it was. I think it was like a social experiment between me and my cousin, where when we went out, I would use a British accent, and he wouldn't, just to gauge, you know, like the reactions that we would get while we were in the UK. So we would go to like farmers markets and whatnot, and I had this like fake accent I was using, and people were generally much warmer to me than they were to my cousin, who's speaking in his regular Canadian accent. I don't know why I'd bring that up, but the UK sucks. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. The UK sucks. So there's absolutely all the reason for Ali to have existential dread. Again, none of that is on the page. There's so much that Morrison says that they wanted to bring to this book. None of it's actually brought into
the
book.
problem is that he's a cipher, and I believe it is mentioned by Ollie himself or his family that he's the artist. What fucking art does Ollie make? I never figured that out.
There is no art. Like, there's nothing.
His art is sadness.
Yeah. I think the only thing the only reason him being an artist matters to is his father perceiving him as a fail son, I guess. Because when they're reporting on, you know, like the big abyss that appeared behind his family's business, you know, his dad's like, oh, my devout son fell and he was trapped, but my artist son helped save him. And they had like a little tizzy over that, but there's nothing about him being an artist that actually matters to the plot. Nothing. Not a single thing. Sophia's introduction, the arranged bride, if you've forgotten already, is also not done well. She just shows up while Ali's searching for the baby, and there's not even like a "who are you? What's your deal?" anything from Ali when they first meet. Like, she's just there, you know. Like they quit there and, you know, here and there, but nothing is said until the baby's actually found. He saves the baby, and he's like, "Wait, you're Sophia?" I
love that part because she didn't actually say she's Sophia. He just put it together.
There's literally nothing that says that she's Sophia. Nothing his family says either. They don't say that she went searching for the baby. They just said a woman, she or the other woman, I think it was, that went to go search for the baby. So there's no indication. There's nothing that says that Sophia is Sophia in Ali's eyes. He just says like, "Oh, you're Sophia." I think it would be really funny if she wasn't Sophia, and she's like, "No, I'm not."
No, I'm Sophia's sister.
Yeah, yeah. Sophia's actually
No, that would
above
actually
ground.
give it a plot.
Yeah, it would. I would actually be doing something fresh with this book, but I guess that was too ahead of the times for Morrison. And yeah, like when they're down there, Baby unleashes the great evil Al Shaitan, and we get our introduction to the Ultra Hadin, who are summoned by rubbing a lotus. Again, rubbing, I guess in this case it's a lamp, like you're rubbing a lamp and the genies pop out, and the genies are 4 ultra gods.
Can I jump in for a second?
Go for it. Go, please.
This is another instance of like me knowing more about mythology than Morrison, and like I am not claiming to be any level of expert on Hindu cosmology or Islam. That's not my aim. I'm saying I know a little bit about comparative mythology, and I know enough about like these cultures and their relationships with each other that there is something interesting that he's not using, right? Like, for example, the Asura come up here, right? And when you look at Asura, I don't know much about the Asura. I'd love to hear about that from you in a second.
Definitely, yeah.
But there's a cognate in the roots of the word that very likely have a connection to like Aesir or Asgardians. And it's like, dude, you're a white guy. Like, that's something that like you can like chip in on. You can do something with that, right? Same with Al Shaitan. Al Shaitan has some similarity to Satan. Like, there's something that you could do there that you're just not smart enough. We're not researching.
And that would have been like a Kirby thing to do, like to connect it to like an overmyth idea and all that.
Right. Yeah, so it's not getting. I think it's a good point. He's not understanding it in a Kirby way, and he's not understanding it in the East Asian way either.
Yeah, and on that note, we might as well talk about it now. This whole time we've been talking about Morrison, like trying to make this an inherently Muslim book, but believe it or not, almost, I'd say 99.9% of the mythology that this book builds around is not Muslim at all. It's Hindu. And when I came to that realization, I had to put down the book and just I had a 1,000-yard stare as I realized what exactly was happening. So oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I read the whole book before I got to before I went back and was like, oh, he was trying to do something about like Muslim culture or Islam and everything else.
Yeah,
I was like, wait, what? That was not in there.
So
I felt like a fucking idiot too for a second, because I was like, wait, is there something I'm not seeing here?
Yeah, so okay. The 2 myths that Morrison has played with, like we mentioned before, 18 Days was playing off the Mahabharata, which is again another Hindu text. And in this one, he has decided to take another big Hindu text, the Ramayana. And the Ramayana is, oh boy, okay, lot to unpack here. So here Morrison is trying to mix the Ramayana and the mythology there with Atlantis, which first off doesn't make sense at all, because Atlantis is in the Atlantic Ocean, surprise. You could have still done point B, which I'm about to make, even in the UK. And point B being Lemuria is a far better mythical sunken city that actually does tie into the Ramayana, because it's technically supposed to be the same island as Lanka or Kumarikandam in that myth. And again, if Atlantis is supposed to be Lanka in the context of this being a Ramayana, remix, if you will, This means that the devils in the book are meant to be asuras. And who? Okay, so the oh god. Okay, so my mom actually hates the Ramayana. Like she absolutely abhors it because she considers it to be an Indo-Aryan text. Um, just because Rama and Sita are portrayed as fair-skinned, and she sees. Like, please research Ramayana if you haven't already. If you, and it'll also help your viewing experience of RRR, which I'll get into in a bit. But
I know a little bit about am I say Ramayana?
yeah, Ramayana or Ramayana.
Ramayana. But if I'm understanding correctly, like if we try to just summarize in a sense, your mom doesn't like that myth because it's got some nationalist principles behind it.
Yeah, it's very much like a fair-skinned god goes to save his love from the dark, demonic beast king. Ravana is supposed to be like this Satanist, like you said, he's supposed to be Satan, right? This devil king on an island full of devils, and Ravana is portrayed as dark skinned. So if you connect the lines in the background, if you will, and in this one, Ben Rama, our Rama character, is fairly light skinned. Would you say that? Would you say that he's very light skinned?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I feel like one of you guys said like hot dog skin or something. I feel like they kind of drew everybody the same, like in terms
Yeah,
of skin color.
yeah. Like Ben Rama in this book is supposed to evoke that sort of like Hindu god in his design, like like the bun, the earring, the hair bun, I should say, the earrings, even just like the square jaw and all. So, oh man, Jesus, like I'm still trying to work my feelings through this.
We got you. So like this is like a double therapy session. Like me and Serge are like both sitting in like upright chairs and like you're laying back on the big couch and you just you take your time.
Yeah, okay. So it's I mean, okay, so the other thing we have to address is the Vimanas. So the Vimana are supposed to be the chariots in this book. And it's really funny because the one Ultra Hadin guy has this like helmet that evokes like a gopuram, which is like a type of Vimana. It's like if you look at Hindu temples, those huge towers, those are gopurams, and like the helmet evokes that. And again, there's a lot of focus on Hindu culture here. Like it's almost impressive, even if it is just like a coat of paint, if you will. But it's insulting that so much effort was put into building this around a Hindu myth and then calling this book a Muslim book. It's insulting to both sides. Like if you're a Muslim, it's not going to be good for you. If you're Hindu, it's not going to be good for you. It just sucks. You're like Morrison and Bond are basically mixing sodium with water by trying to say that like Islam and Hinduism are the same thing. Because that's what it seems like I'm getting here,
It's about healing that 9/11 wound between Islam and Hindu culture.
The Hindu culture that had nothing to do with either side of 9/11.
I mean, this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, this book was so fucking weird to me for so many reasons, dude. Like, I first read about this book when it was a few years after it was announced. It had been out for a few years, and I saw this interview where Grant goes, I'm trying to take and do superheroes from a totally different perspective. And, where American superheroes are really like powered by like, they're all very violent in the way they act, right? Which is true. He goes, but I'm thinking, what if I did superheroes powered by love? Which I'm like, oh, okay, like that could be something. And like if you can somehow just not think about the cultural aspects of this. If you just try to read it as a superhero story, it doesn't even work in that sense. Like there's no like superheroes doing superhero things. They all just kind of stand around and talk. Like there's no like mesmerizing feats that let the artist really get to like go buck wild. Like even them being powered by love only comes up once when Prince Ben Rama gets rejected by Sophia. He's just like, oh, I'm feeling very weak. But like, there's so much you could do with being powered by love. I mean, it works with the Golden Age Wonder Woman stories in a different way than the traditional superheroes. Like this book, like just to go back to the pacing, like it doesn't work in like in terms of syntax, story syntax. It's just it goes panel to panel and there's events, but there's very little connective tissue. Nothing is happening and everything is happening, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
things just happen. Like there's that one scene of the army fighting against the Vimanas, and it's just there. There's nothing. It doesn't get brought up again. And there's the one fucking army guy that's like, "This is all your fault, Ali," or something. And it's like nothing. There's no reason
For
for
that to
half
be
of
there.
these. Yeah, there's no reason for that to be there. It's just there because I guess I don't know. Morrison felt like putting it there.
Well, and
But
like
there is this. Or no, go ahead.
I have this high bar for how Morrison can do superpowers and make that work for the artist. Like, if you look at Flex Mentallo, like part of the like there's all kinds of metatextual elements in that book that are really fun, but in Flex Mentallo, like how this dude squeezes his muscles can like alter reality. And that's great because you get to see like Frank drawing this muscle man in these like really silly muscle man poses. And as he's flexing, then like something can be like popping into reality or like changing shape. Like that is using the comic book medium. Like I would
Yeah,
struggle to find a page where the any of these Ultra Hadeen are doing something. They just stand. Like it's
they're just there.
weird.
They're just there to proselytize and just like offer. Like the guy in the orb does nothing. And the guy with the Goldblum helmet doesn't do anything either. Uh, it, it's insulting to me because, again, Morrison wrote this at 45. They wrote this in 2005. So that by this point they had written Flex Mentallo, JLA, X-Men. They'd written so many of their iconic runs, and yet this book turned out the way it did. Like how? How? That's what I'm left wondering. It's like, how does this book exist in the state that it does?
I
And
mean,
unlike Kill Your Boyfriend, which was a one shot, they had 3 issues to do this.
yeah, and it's very weird with the 3 issues because I don't know if you guys have heard this about Morrison. I don't know how common this is or not, but like there's a sort of philosophy with the Morrison book that like say this will be a 5 issue, 8 issue run, whatever. Like, oh, I'm 7 issues into this 8 issue run. I'm not seeing where it's going, and then it's like, oh, trust me, bro, it all comes together in issue 8. And I was like on issue 2 of this. I had one more issue. I'm like, when is he going to like tie all these threads together? When is something cool going to happen? And then I got to the last page of 3 and I was convinced, okay, there's like a 4th issue that I'm like, I must have
Yeah.
accidentally skipped something. It's a
Oh,
wreck. It doesn't work.
nothing about this book works. One other thing about the Hindu thing, I thought it was very funny when they sound this like great horn at the very end, and like the symbol is like a musical note that's been styled to look like a swastika. And again, this is a swastika in a Hindu sense, but that's what I mean. It's a swastika in a Hindu sense. Like this is Hindu mythology that they're putting on display here. Jumping back in time though. So Ali's role in the first 2/3 of this book, other than surmising about how horrible his life is like, okay, so imagine the book of Genesis, right? And you got like Adam and Eve, they're in the Garden of Eden, they're doing whatever, right? And in the background, there's just this guy named Dave just chilling, and he's just complaining about how shitty his life is. That's what this book is, like.
And
Allie
Dave's
is so...
dad and Dave's brother are like also being equally weird.
Yeah. And it boggles my mind because, like, for the majority of this, it's just him being passive about the things going on around him. And again, this also, I guess, ties back to Kill Your Boyfriend, where, like, girl is also very passive in the events that happen around her while remarking on that. If 10 years between those books, and that element hasn't changed. And then 2/3 of the way through this book, one of the craziest things that I've seen put to page happens, and I genuinely could not believe that Morrison thought that this was, I don't know, okay to write, just a good idea. So early on in the book, Ali says that if his bride is ugly, he's gonna hang himself, and he has a noose in his pocket. His brother even remarks, "Hey, dude, what the fuck? Why do you have a noose in your pocket?" And then later in the book, when he realizes that, like, oh, Sophia's probably fated to be with Benrama or whatever, he goes home and he hangs himself. Why did he? What the fuck? Why did he go hang himself? Oh, Jesus. Oh. Do you guys have thoughts? I'm sorry. Just I feel like I'm losing my mind here. And oh.
I think the other part that makes it weird is like that, like the dad has a heart attack.
Yeah,
and the son dies too, like, and they all die at the exact same time. And like,
it's so comedic because
like,
he hangs himself, his brother falls into a coma, and then his dad briefly dies of angina.
Yeah, and like,
is that the weird comedy? I guess is that the weird...
so you're just like, this is left field, and he's like, but wait, there's more. And
the whole family dies. You get 3 for 1.
I feel like all the moments of violence in this or like, violence or like harm are just out of left field, because the rest of it seems like, even if it's like a huge invasion, it doesn't seem really like a violent comic, except for like these random moments when like they have like the parliament, I guess that's what you call the ruling body in England, and he pulls off one of the heads and makes them kiss. And like, you're just like, why is this happening?
That's the one
and
page.
It just kind of moves on.
I actually really like that page. It doesn't need to be there, but I like it.
I thought it was really funny. Where, yeah, it's like all the violence in this.
Oh no, I was gonna say there's this anarchist type character who throws a Molotov cocktail, and one of the devils like catches it and drinks out of it like a little shot glass.
Yeah,
that's a good moment, like.
There's a lot of moments where I'm like, I can't tell if this is just good or bizarre in the context of the comic.
Yeah,
and I can't even appreciate it because it's like there's so many of them.
I mean, there is definitely, Morrison has this strange technique where he will intentionally make an important action to the story happen off panel or in between panels. And there is a way you can do that is really clever and makes the action flow quickly. There's another way you can do that is disorienting for the sake of disorienting, and ends up making all the cool shit I would love to see illustrated by someone as talented as Philip Bond just not happen. And then you're just wishing, like, wait, I wanted to see that cool thing. Like, yeah. I don't know, like you said the page with the politicians, like that one guy gets his head ripped out of his body, and then he makes the two politicians kiss. Like, it's really amusing and it's funny and it's really visceral violence. But there's no punches thrown in this book. Even when characters fire lasers at each other, the script somehow calls for a way to not show the impacts, It's very avoidant in this weird sense.
Yeah. I mean, That would be brilliant if it again was trying to tell the human interest story. I think it thinks it's telling, but then you have like the kid hang himself, and you're just like, I'm not.
And that
I feel bad because I'm not invested in his life, but I
right.
want you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
Like I should feel worse
when it
about
happens,
this
it's
than I
still like
do.
fucked up. You're like, oh, I didn't really care for the character before, but why the fuck you
Yeah,
go and kill him?
And him
And
killing himself is so strange because he's going to kill himself because presumably his wife will be ugly. But this girl he's known for like 24 hours has not even professed her love to Ben Rama. He just assumes she is, and he's babbling, and she's understandably confused. Then he goes and kills himself. Like it's
I
not that
get
it's like
secondhand embarrassment. I'm sorry. It's just I get secondhand embarrassment from that line of thinking.
it feels very much like Morrison going through the motions of romantic comedies, right? Romantic
Yeah.
comedies need to have this huge misunderstanding where someone could have said the one thing that would have cleared the air and made everything fine, but instead a big misunderstanding happens. And instead of that big misunderstanding being like an argument where the characters need to at least be authentic, like that's something that a romantic comedy can do really well. Instead, he just does this like head trip thing where Ollie kills himself, and like Serge says, "Oh, my whole family's here in the afterlife. Isn't that neato?" Like
yeah.
it just all so like forced. And the last thing I'll say about the romance comedies is I don't think Morrison cares or particularly enjoys romance comedies, but he's trying to do rom-coms because like he knows that that's kind of a staple in like Hindu cinema. But again, it's like, dude, like you're phoning this in. You don't actually care about that. If you liked some of these musicals and these rom-coms from there, like it would show. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah, this
I
like
think
if the point was to make this like an Indian cinema Bollywood type like film, it's a failure in that regard too. It's just
Right.
nothing about this works. Nothing.
I think what makes it even funnier was like he hangs himself right, and she's at the same time telling Ben Rama that she wants to stay with Ali. And then he gets like the shit kicked out of him by a bunch of leaves getting blown out of him because he's lost his power of love. And you're just like you're not even able to like appreciate these moments because then you're like go to the next scene. It's like, oh, Ali killed himself, and you're like, what? This is like a whiplash, and you're not able to
Yeah,
like process anything.
and again, things just happen. There's no like sort of good transition between any of these moments, so you're just left like it's like you're in a roller coaster and you're just forced to take in what's happening without any sort of ability to like stop and be like, hey, why did this happen? Why are we doing this? And the afterlife segment gets me because that is where Morrison, for some reason, decides to deviate away from the Kirby aspects, away from every other aspect, to go into something that they're more familiar with, which is metatext. And the metatext here doesn't work at all. Like there's that one page where Ali, like reaches out of the panel to flip the page, and I rolled my eyes so hard at that. It feels amateurish even by Morrison's ver- I wanted to say Morrison standards, but like just I don't know. It honestly feels like Vimanarama was a book that Morrison wrote when they were like 15 or 16, and found at the age of 45 and was like, yeah, you know what? I can probably get an artist on this, and shipped it out to Vertigo because like I still can't believe that the metatext is this weak in a book that came out like 7 years after, or not even 7 years, like more than that, after Flex Mentallo and all those books.
Yeah, it
Hell, even
feels
it's almost like 15 years since Animal Man, right?
it feels yeah, about it feels very desperate. Like because it's like again, I really wanted to believe this is going somewhere, and then like you said, this is something that Morrison he's more in his wheelhouse when like Ollie is in the afterlife and like seeing reality from a higher perspective, seeing himself in greater context. And he's, there's a lot of wordplay here with like how the words are juxtaposed with the images. Like it's a great
Mm,
showcase for Bond. Bond's doing some really cool stuff here. But the
yeah.
the nature of like the spoken word and the written word, how those juxtapose, how that can be related to magic and
Oh,
faith and the nature of the universe. It's not that those are interesting ideas, those are sacred ideas. It's that Morrison does that in such a better way in all those other books you mentioned. And here he's like, oh, fuck, I gotta conclude this book. Okay, I'll just do my old trick again. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't know what else to do here.
Yeah, it's pretty much just like pulling out the old reliable
Right, right,
as a Deus Ex Machina of sorts.
right.
it also
But
just feels like um it's like he Grant Morrison was like trying to do like like again the experiment of a hero of love and like in a different culture, and then had to like try to inflate it to do more almost, and like kind of lost the thread because it like becomes like this weird War of the Worlds type, like we say quasi superhero journey, but it's like it doesn't do any of these things, right? So it's just kind of left being not satisfying with any of these cat things he's trying to toy with.
yeah. Well, I think that's.
And then
Oh, go ahead.
and then somehow for reasons, again, everything is just for reasons, like Ali becomes Ben Rama by the end, which like I had wanted to see, but like he shows it on the page, but it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't make sense in any way. So then by the
There's no
time,
passing of the arms. Yeah. There's nothing that indicates that Ben Rama, like, first off, died or like moved on or anything. But
well, we show it, and again, it's perfectly how Serge said it. Like, when Ben Rama is like being hit by the leaves and it hurts, like that's really funny, but like you don't get to enjoy it or laugh at it because the tone is shifting so fast. So that's
yeah,
the weird thing is we do see the passing of the torch. We do see these pages with Ben Rama, like it's after the turning of the page where Ben Rama like passes the mantle to Ali, but it doesn't feel like it makes sense, and it doesn't hit. Nothing hits, nothing lands. So by the time when we see Ali like wearing the costume, it's like, wait, I wanted to see this 2 issues ago. Like, why is this here now? And it's again not clear what the powers are, what the responsibilities are, how this will change his life. It's all flash and like no ramifications.
haha. No Vimana ramifications. Hey,
Oh.
w- so one last thing I want to say is the use of Arabic script in both Vimanarama and Kill Your Boyfriend. Uh, so throughout the book, you see a lot of script that, again, it's tough to say in certain panels, but a lot of it does look like Arabic script. I consulted my coalition of Arabic script speaking Arabic script language speaking folks, friends, and I basically asked them, "Hey, what does this say?" Just to get an idea of like which language they're using. I think in Vimanarama's case, they were using Urdu because the characters are Pakistani. But again, it doesn't make sense because Urdu is Pakistani, and these are Hindu characters. So at the very least, they would probably be using something closer to like Farsi or
I think
Farsi.
it's safe to say Grant Morrison does not know the difference between
Yeah,
any of these.
I mean, I'm not saying that Morrison knows or even cares about like the Arabic script using here. Again, it's all window dressing. But the
Yeah,
funny thing is, in Kill Your Boyfriend, there's this part where girl is having sex with one of the artists, the mischief makers, whatever, Billy, and you see that Billy has a back tattoo, and the back tattoo is written in Arabic script. So I took a screenshot, I passed it around, and be like, "Hey, what is this saying?" I haven't been able to fully figure it out yet, but again, what the coalition tells me is that it is very likely that it says goat fucker or cow fucker in either Urdu, Farsi, or Arabic.
That would be
amazing.
genius if Morrison was like making a comment on people like appropriating cultures, but it ends up being like the most unintentional commentary on Morrison's writing style.
Yeah, again, like it would be funny if Morrison himself was not as grossly Orientalist in their work as they were. But yeah, I figured I might as well bring that up. I'll put the tattoo in the show notes just in case any viewer wants to take their own stab at what it actually says.
Yeah, we're having a Midnight Grappler Animals contest. Send in your best guess with a prize.
Learn Urdu and win a prize. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say on Vimanarama. Bad book. I can't believe it exists. Everyone involved in this book should feel ashamed. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm pretty sure this was actually the book that Pornsack Show was involved with.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, that's what makes it even funnier, right? The good Asian. Sure.
Yeah, the good Asian. This is the less than mediocre Asian, if you will, the subpar Asian.
I mean, I have one thing I want to say about Grant before we close out, because I alluded to this before. It's like Grant really, when I first discovered Grant Morrison's work, Morrison really appealed to me because there was this contention with philosophies and other cultures and a politics of sort too. Like, I was really opposed to the Iraq War, and Morrison was, his brand at the time was very much, I'm a pacifist. My dad was a soldier, but I oppose war. And in the last few years, it's just, that is not the same Morrison. Morrison is like really shed all of that. Like, I don't know what Morrison's about anymore. And it, a little bit of it is me like investing too much in like caring about someone else having a parasocial relationship. But I think it's really interesting too that like it does tie deeply into both books where like, I contain multitudes, right? I can be a riot girl, I can be a dyke, whatever. But then even in that interview we gave about Grant's pronouns, Grant says like, don't try to put me in a box, I'll let you down. And so it's like, cool, dude. All right.
Well, I'll say for sure, you let me down on this one, Grant. You really let me down.
Yeah. I kind of want to mention memetic colonialism because, I just remember that phrase Grant Morrison put in one of their Substack posts. Do you guys remember that?
No, please
No,
elaborate.
I have not been reading.
Grant Morrison in Superman and the Authority annotations. They were talking with Philip K. Johnson about like, I guess the fact that Superman can like go and like free other countries, but like, so I'm gonna read the paragraph actually.
Please.
It's two paragraphs here. Using a kids adventure heroes to make hackneyed observations about typical human being behavior does not in fact apply to make up comic book characters. Strikes me as, I don't know, whimsical, dilettante, a squandering of energy and creativity. This is personal bias, but the desire to compel fantasy worlds to conform to the allegedly superior rules of grim reality can feel to me like a form of memetic colonialism that I generally found distasteful, which I found myself rebelling against since I got started in U.S. monthly comics in the late 80s with Animal Man. So he's basically talking about how, like, the advantage of Superman and the Authority, because the comic ends with them going to another world to go free from a dictator.
Right.
It's like, they're free of colonial discourse. And that really struck me as I read this again, like, oh, okay. You just don't understand this concept like your whole life. Yeah. You've never understood this.
Memetic colonialism.
Memetic colonialism.
Wait, I'm sorry. Like, I'm so grateful you mentioned this because I did not know this quote, and this kind of feels like the keystone to everything we're talking about here. It just is, if I'm understanding correctly, is Morrison calling like readers and critics the colonizers? What the fuck is he saying there?
I believe that's like what they're doing is that like. I think, well, what he's criticizing, I think, in the longer Substack, so I don't get it wrong, is the idea of casting them as anti-heroes or monsters, or like dragging, like, putting them in on the side of like colonialist viewpoints is horrible because they're heroes, they're just inspired, this and that. And yeah, I think about that a lot now with a story like this.
God damn. Just, like, I, in the back of my head, I was like, okay, like, this was 2005. Maybe Morrison has actually learned something. Even since 18 Days in Avatar X, like, maybe Morrison's actually learned something about, like, Orientalism or anything, like, and God, this is Substack. So, like, what, a year ago at the very max?
Yeah, this was February 16th, 2022.
Almost a year ago. Jesus.
Mm.
What a note. What I think is a good note to end on, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like I think almost everything else we've covered. It's like, oh, this was really cool. I mean, like even fuck the Higgins book with the Toku hero, the
Oh,
image
Radiant
book.
Black.
Even Radiant Black, it was like I can see what you're trying to do here. I could revisit this and see some
Yeah.
growth. Like
And we
this is the
will.
first.
And we
Yeah,
will.
yeah, we will. This is the first episode that was like fucking downer for everybody involved. I mean everybody.
Yeah. Not a single redeeming element here. One last passing comment I want to make. I totally understand how and why Morrison would like RRR now. That's all I'm gonna
Hmm.
say. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Serge, before we do our closeout, you got any plugs? Anything you want to cover?
No, no, this was great. That's it. I don't got anything
Well,
going on right now.
I loved having you on, man. This was so
yeah,
much
it was
fun.
great.
Yeah, this was a
What's
blast.
your Twitter so people can follow you?
Oh, yeah, I should probably plug that. I am at the THEE Fantomas, Fantomas. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, awesome. It was great having you on. It's always fun having guests on to delve into the murky depths with us. Uh, and yeah, we'd love to have you back for
Absolutely.
hopefully something better than both the books we read today.
It'll be hard to find something worse. That's all I can
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, this dear reader, we also have something better for you coming in the future. We promise.
Mhm.
Uh, if you would like to follow either one of us as well, you can follow Lan at Lan Tweets, LANTWEETS. Or if you would like to follow myself, Salt M Bank, SALTMBANK. All three of us are on Twitter. If you'd like to email the show, unfortunately, yeah. If you'd like to contact the show with questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us midnightgrappleranimals@gmail.com, all one word, spelled like the pod. We have a Discord. We can link to that in our show notes. And give us a review. We haven't asked for that yet. If you have
Yeah.
a podcast listening to app of choice, I would be so grateful for a review. I'll give you a little something,
I have
something if
no
you
idea
do.
what reviews do, but it would be great for our egos at the very least,
That's
for
right.
us for you to review us positively. Talk about how we opened your eyes to the threat of memetic colonialism and really talked about expanding your mind to various cultures. Some shit. Just
Yeah.
just review us positively, please.
Yeah, the show is still free, so you can consider that like your payment.
Mm, fair enough.
Yeah, we'll link a Discord that we have, and other than that, hey, thank you for joining us. We'll bring you a better comic or movie next time.
Oh yes, we will. Thanks for listening.